All right, Crumb Nation, welcome back. It's been a while. How you doing, Ryan?
Well, lots happened since the last time I've seen you, Brian.
It has. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I don't know that we really need to go into it, but for those of you who don't know, we took a couple weeks off to make sure that we were giving the proper space for the right conversation to be had in this country, and it's still going on. It still should be had about police violence and how the police treat people of color in this country. I think I speak for both of us when I say Black Lives Matter, and we are firmly on that side of things.
Yes.
Which to me should just be everybody, but you go through any Facebook comment section and you'll find out that the world is a wild and crazy place.
Yeah, I mean, and read the news today. Like nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. Yeah.
There were people lynched in California. Another man shot in Georgia. So I just wanted to, before we do anything, highlight two things that kind of relate to what we talk about in kind of the music world on this. And one in particular in Chicago. And actually our guest who was going to be next week, we're going to have to work something out here. But he's part of organizing in Chicago a march next week on the 21st that's working to bring the kind of Chicago music community together, musicians, industry workers, and friends to kind of march to do a peaceful protest. And that will be, I have the information in front of me, starting at 9:30 in Lincoln Park at the Julia Porter Park at Fullerton and Lincoln, and then start walking around 10. So if a musician if anybody's interested in that in Chicago, that's happening. It's called the Chicago Musician Mark for Equality and Change. So check that out. And the other thing that I just wanted to talk about, because this brings up a lot of, there's a lot of different things to talk about and a lot of different aspects of kind of what's happening in the country and been happening that we could talk about. But one kind of interesting thing to look at is just look up Nicholas Payton and Black American music. And Nicholas has been pretty outspoken. BAM is his thing, and he's been pretty outspoken about the history of the word jazz and what jazz means and what Black American music is. And do yourself a favor, if you don't know about it, kind of look it up, see what Nicholas has to say. It's really interesting, and will kind of, flip your brain a little bit about not just Black art culture in this country, but music in this country, American music, and where it comes from. Because, all these different genres, all these different things we put out there, whether it's rock and roll, blues, or jazz, why are they different things? They are all parts of what was Black music and Black culture. So in regards to what we talk about on this show, I just think, check that out. It's really worth listening to and reading what Nicholas has written, a bunch of essays, and there's talks on YouTube, and he's just a ridiculously amazing musician. So I just wanted to say that at the top.
Hell yeah. Do that. Yeah, it's been a wild couple of weeks. I don't have a whole lot of music news to talk about that I think maybe rightfully we've been ignoring that. Other than, the usual stuff that we've been talking about. I saw a Consequence of Sound article about how if independent venues don't get some assistance within 6 months, so that would be like 3 more months from now since it started, 90% of venues look like they're going to close, independent venues, which is a scary figure. So while we try to think about safety for everybody in this country, it just kind of like it's been so important to be thinking about Black Lives Matter and the movement and all the true changes that have been being made but aren't nearly enough. And I've been to a couple protests and people wearing masks and all that. But remember that safety for everybody is still important in terms of coronavirus. So if you are going to demonstrations, wear a mask, and that's why these venues aren't opening. That's why you're not seeing live music happening in most cases. So I just want to make sure we're touching on that too. So make sure you're staying safe, staying home unless you have to go out. And I would certainly consider going to a protest a reason to go out.
Better than going to Kid Rock's bar in Nashville. Did you see that insanity?
I did see that.
Come on, packed. Nashville.
I saw Tootsie's in Nashville was the same way. And
it's the same owner.
Is it the same? Well, not Kid Rock for anybody who's confused.
Well, yeah, not Kid, what's his name? It'll come to me. But
I saw that that owner was walking around Tootsie's yelling at people to take their masks off.
Oh yeah, he's a piece of trash.
He's a real garbage
man. I don't mind
man.
saying that publicly. He's got a history of racist nonsense, and obviously he's putting all these people in. I saw a thread from a friend in Nashville who put that up, and just that kind of, and I think this touches on what a lot of people are afraid of. Like, okay, if people leave there, might not necessarily be sick, but you could get somebody sick, and 1,000 people crammed into that bar. I had a meeting. This is skipping around a little bit, but I talked to a guy early this week who we should talk to. They started a new venue in Chicago, and he was kind of talking about what they want to do moving forward, and like if they can open in the fall, how they're going to do it. And they opened this space, Epiphany Arts, that has 3 different venues in it, and essentially like one of the rooms is this 100-cap listening room that they're going to try to have 40 people in. But just to do that, I mean, they're staffing like a mitigation expert, like on staff, the bathroom, all of this stuff that they're going through. And, he talked to me for maybe an hour about it. And then seeing that in Nashville, it's just like, hey, whatever, everybody come on in. Let's.
Well, it's crazy because there are, like, even in Iowa, there are venues that are like as of this weekend, there is no longer even a 50% capacity rule. Like,
really?
They're just saying try to keep people socially distanced, but all the reins are off now in Iowa, and like obviously no like real music venues. When I talk about like a club, like there's no clubs doing shows or anything like that, but there are like restaurants, and there have been shows, and I've been seeing people out and playing, and there's like a stigma to it for sure. People are afraid to do it because they're afraid they're going to be judged for playing the show, which is a sticky situation because like I totally understand if you haven't been working for 3 months, and there's a lot of bands around Iowa who, maybe they have a day job, but music is a very significant portion of their income, or they're just full-time musicians. And so, for me, it's been interesting to be like, one of the venues I book is Big Grove Brewery here. We have a large outdoor patio that's actually twice as big as it was before the coronavirus. They expanded it. And so like, is it safe to have somebody in the corner of the patio away from everybody outside where everybody's socially distanced outside and listening to music? Probably. Is it ethical to be inviting people to leave their house and go into public right now? Like, I don't know about that. There's so many, it's just such a weird gray area. And I think it always comes down to like a lack of leadership and a lack of direction of what is safe. Cause right now they're basically like, I don't know, it never went away, but we're going to kind of pretend like it doesn't exist now. So It's up to you guys. So that's something I've been dealing with. So
I had an interesting playing music experience where I played on the back of the Fitzgerald's pickup truck,
right,
roving around, the neighborhoods around Fitzgerald's. And it was awesome. And I mean, props to them for what they're doing, and how they're doing it. And it was a lot of fun, but it was also very weird to kind of like, you'd pull down a certain block, and it was a blast. People were pumped, coming out of their houses, having a ton of fun. But then you get to a certain block and be like, man, there's a lot of people on that front lawn. None of them were even mad. Your head starts to kind of wander, and it's just, it's it's very bizarre to play. That was like the first time I played in public in months, and it was weird. Just as a performer, my head was just like, I'd be like, where am
I
I in
wanted
the
to ask
song?
you
'Cause
about that. Yeah,
I'm just thinking about how those like that lawn is basically having a party right now.
right. Did you get a sense that the people watching you play were worried about it at all, or was it kind of like, nah, we're out and about and having fun?
I mean, it changed block to block. Like people,
Right.
people definitely were having a lot of fun. It was very cool. Like
Uh-huh.
it was an extremely positive experience, but more just my own anxieties at times hit in, and I'm like, just like I opening my eyes and seeing something, and all of a sudden I'm not thinking about what I'm playing, but thinking about,
Right.
like, oh, I don't know about those people.
Not to mention you're on a truck.
Not to mention that, yeah, exactly.
Well, that's cool. I've been having a lot of fun keeping up with Fitzgerald's doing that. I think that's a really cool idea and a good, smart way to keep people safe.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like you were saying, there's a venue here that is about to open in mid-July. They were supposed to open in April, I think, but they bumped it to mid-July, maybe, if that'll happen. But it's kind of similar. There's 3 rooms, different sizes. So hopefully I'll have some updates on that. I'm meeting with the guy who's opening it this week to kind of see what his plan is. I'm really curious to see what he says. And he's actually kind of connected to our guest this week. The guy who owns this venue that's about to open owns a bunch of venues called Tin Roof all over the South. And our guest, Adam Spriggs, works for Madison Entertainment, who also books all the Tin Roof restaurants and venues. So we'll have to see what Adam thinks about that. But yeah,
pretty pro transition there, Brian.
Hey, how about that? Should we bring
that?
Let's bring Adam on, because Adam's going to be part of our music review this week. It's a very special music review. So here's Adam. Hey, Adam.
Hey, everybody. How we doing?
Doing good. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Crumbs. Happy to be here.
It's an honor. Thank you for inviting me.
So in case you don't know Adam, I'm going to play a little video here that's just kind of our intro to the Crumbs music review. And typically Ryan and I just kind of dance in the background, so you can feel free to do that if you want.
I will observe.
You don't have to watch
it. Okay, here we go. Crumbs music review.
Hey man, what have you been listening to?
Crumbs music review. Music review.
Okay, very special Crumbs music review with a special guest. He actually decided to participate with what we were reviewing this week, which is the new Garth Brooks documentary on Netflix that is out right now. It's a whopper. It's about 3 hours, I think. Two separate hour-and-a-half, just pure diving into girth. It has its ups and downs. I think that I don't know if I speak for everybody, I guess, but I have heard my entire life that Garth is nothing but an incredibly genuine, super nice, awesome guy, takes the time, appreciates his fans. I didn't see anything that would negate that, but I think he also might be capable of murdering somebody.
Oh yeah.
It was my big takeaway.
So the backstory of that is that I think last weekend I woke up and just needed to not consume news for a minute. I needed some kind of morning distraction, and that's the first thing that popped up. And do you know Tom Segura is, right?
Yeah,
comedian.
Comedian.
So there had been this bit I'd seen him talk about it where it was just funny, him kind of just talking about Garth and that guy's definitely murdered somebody. And then I saw the documentary pop up, and I'm like, there's no way this isn't going to make me feel good.
Yeah.
So put it on, and he started crying for the first time 30 seconds into it. And I think that's the first time I texted you, dude, get on board. Because I will watch a music documentary about anything and get roped in. I've seen multiple documentaries on Def Leppard. I don't know why.
It's a great story.
And I
Steve
like
Clark.
them. And I like them. Yeah, exactly. I like them all. This one was wild. And I mean, a couple of different takeaways. Like I don't know if forget is the right word, but like I have no concept of how huge Garth Brooks was. Like I remember it from the 90s.
Right.
But there are moments in that where it's like, wait, what? He sold like 1 million tickets. And while I'm dealing with thinking about how Garth can sell 1 million tickets, he's crying about the fact that he sold 1 million tickets. And I'm like,
And
this
he's-
thing.
And he's like, is anybody going to show up? You know, like, it's New York. Like, does anybody like country? That whole thing is wild. Yeah, he cries about everything. My favorite moments were when he would just say a line from one of his songs and then just be like, it's so true. Like, it was wild. Adam, where are you at on all this? Did you have any immediate takeaways?
Listen, I want to believe that he is that genuine because, you know, we've been in this business a long time, and Brian and I together have met some real assholes. We've also met some really cool people that like 13-year-old me can't believe that he met. And I've got a Garth Brooks story. We can save that. But like, he really was, that moment with him was very genuine. And as I watch this, it's like, I always had a rule as a kid. Like, I always wanted to be a rock star, but I'm tone deaf, so it didn't work out. But like, I always made a pact to myself. I was like, one time Gavin Rossdale didn't want to give me an autograph. I was like, and Billy Corgan, like in the same week. And I was like, I will never not stop for an autograph. Like, I just feel like this is the whole point of why do you want to be a rock star, is because you want to make people's dreams come true. And taking those, like as a kid, I would camp out like behind Freedom Hall and met Def Leppard once, you know, like,
Right.
And when Joe Elliott stopped and shook my hand, it was just a quick thing, but like it meant the world to this kid from Louisville, Kentucky, that the lead singer of Def Leppard took a moment, shook my hand, and got in his van.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's just, you wish that everyone, because I think as music fans like we are, we love them. And I know we put them on pedestals, and I can't imagine how hard it would be. Listen to that second Counting Crows album. He'll tell you how hard it is. But like, you know, it's, you know, you want them to love, you know, to give you that love back in return. And so, and I watched it, and my wife was kind of being a little snarky at times. The same thing, like, oh my God, how many times did this guy cry? Like, yes, you would have missed the dance, but do you have to choke up? You've sang that song how many damn times? But like, I'm like, right, but like, he heard this song at the Bluebird, and like, he just knew, and he changed this man's life by taking that one night at the Bluebird. It's like, I was think I love comedy, and Brian knows this. We do a lot of comedy booking, and like, I'll go to the Comedy Store and I'll sit in the back and I'll watch guys like Orny Adams or different people and have a night where I'm like, I'm going to go now offer them tens of thousands of dollars to play in front of thousands of people because I happen to be in the audience, and was like, I want you to, I want more people to know you because I'm a fan. And so, you know, we're all, I don't know, man, sorry to bring it back to Garth. It's just like, you just want to believe is, you know, you're in that concert. Like, we were in the front row one night, and I remember he was looking up and he's like, I see that kid up in 313 whose head has been on his dad's shoulder since the beginning of the show. And I've seen this person, he points to the guy next to us who's saying along to like every word. And you're like, holy shit, man. And then that story actually he told about backstage at Staples Center, where he brought up, we were at that show. That was the night we had my, long story short, my brother and I got really crappy tickets for show one. And then we're like, you know what? Let's just go get in line at the box office. He had 3 shows in a day. We sat at the box office, and they opened up doors. They released front row seats at every Garth concert. So all of a sudden we went from up top to the front row. And we were down there when he brought that lady up on stage, and he's like, this is, I forget what her name was. And he's like, she asked me what it's like to be in front of all of you guys. Can you guys let her know? And like, and the crowd just, and we're right there. We're turning around. It's like, you know, and you're like, and they turn up all the house lights, and this woman is weeping, and Garth is smiling. And you're like, that's so effing cool. Even if it's just a shtick or a bit, like, he gave this woman a moment in her life that she will never, ever forget. So
it's like the perfect combination of like cheesiness and being genuine. Like, he is genuinely a cheesy,
genuinely cheesy.
Which,
yeah.
You know, I see the pictures. I think, is that him in a picture behind you? Yeah.
Thanks for that, right, Joe. It just happens to be. I brought it with me just for this interview. It is now. If you see his hat, it's 6 million. He sold 6 million tickets for this one concert, and he's wearing the hat just to prove it to everyone.
But it's funny because I'm looking at the stuff behind you, and I'm kind of like, you know, I thought this when I was watching it too. I'm like, he cries more, but he kind of reminds me of Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
like kind of his MO, and it even looks kind of like his shows. I mean,
It's a preacher. You're going to church. When you go to Garth or Bruce, you're going to church.
Right.
so it kind of like, I have to say that if this is a Crumbs review, I'm saying watch it, because like the guy, hate the guy, like good rock documentaries, or if you want something to kind of laugh at, you can come at this thing from any angle you want. Like, you can watch it and walk away and be like, that guy's insane, or walk away and being like, wow, what a genuine, amazing. I mean, there's a whole middle section where he like leaves at the peak of his career to raise his daughters.
Right.
Like, I think there is
it has
some
that
genuineness.
insane living on the same property as his ex-wife. Like that whole thing where they'd like have a regimen of who drove who to school, and they'd see both their parents. Like, that was, I don't know how they got through that. But
and then Miss Trish Yearwood shows up, out of nowhere.
Right.
And he calls her Miss He calls her
Miss Yearwood.
It's Yearwood.
Mrs. Brooks, I guess.
The thing that my wife and I kept talking about, and this is like the only knock I will give it as like a rock documentary, is that like every rock documentary, or all the good ones, have, there's like real conflict, and there's like real like struggle to make it. And Garth's whole, like, he didn't struggle at all. It didn't seem like, to like get big. Like, he goes to Nashville.
Yeah, that one trip to Nashville
for an hour.
For an hour, immediately meets with somebody at ASCAP, which is not easy to do. They like him, and then he's like, cool, you got to pay me $700 a week or whatever. And then they're like, no, that's not how it works. And he's like, well, that's what I make at home, so I'm going back home. And it's like, yeah, why did you leave, man? You had a great thing going on at home. I don't know. The whole time, then he'd be like, man, it was really tough. We had roommates, It's just like, God.
Hey, his dad said something apparently to him when he got back from Nashville.
Not lips are sealed. We can't. Yeah.
It was
But we just say, though, how amazing, though, for an artist to be able to walk away at the top. Like, he didn't make a bad album for another 10 years. So, like, what a way to like crystallize your career and really save yourself for that next round of touring. Like, he was at his peak, and you watch this, you're like, there's so many songs that that this guy has done, and he just walked away. And so you leave people for 10 years, like, I grew up in Kentucky, so I love the guy, and you're like, you will just want to see those shows again. I'm sure it's the same thing as like when Springsteen, broke up the E Street Band, and you have those moments. So kudos for him, because I don't know how many other people would have the balls, or especially with an ego and whatnot, to walk away when you're on top of your game.
For sure.
That's hard.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a good career move, honestly.
It was.
So I think the Crumbs review is in. Watch it
and experience everything.
The one more thing I wanted to, and then we'll get to something else. But there's also, if you're looking for music to check out, Rough Trade put up a Bandcamp playlist for Black Lives Matter. So it's a compilation benefiting Black Lives Matter. It is massive. There are, let me see how many songs are on this thing. There are 100 songs on it. All kinds of killer bands from like Caliphone to, a Giant, some bands I've never heard of, but I put it on and it was very, very cool. So if you're looking for some music that crosses like all genres and is benefiting Black Lives Matter and has some really cool music and some really current music, check that out too.
Awesome. I'd also give a thumbs up to the new Run the Jewels album.
Oh yeah, that one too.
It's awesome. So yeah, Crumbs music review. Go watch Garth Brooks, listen to the Rough Trade compilation, listen to Run the Jewels. And now we're going to talk with Adam Spriggs. This is usually when we introduce you on the show. So I'll give you a quick little introduction, I guess. Adam and I used to work together. I used to work for Madison Entertainment. Adam is one of the founders of Madison Entertainment. He's booked clubs from 300 capacity to tens of thousands of people at massive music festivals and everything in between. How many venues are you booking right now, Adam?
Well, none.
Well, yeah.
The whole pandemic thing. No, if it wasn't for a pandemic, I would under my belt, like under my watch, would be like 4 clubs and and a couple festivals.
Right.
And we participate. We have a big group of guys. We have 8 of us on our team, and we did like $48 million of booking last year. And then a pandemic hit. But
So you've been doing much better since I left.
it's like someone called it dead weight. And I
There you
said,
go.
that's not what we should have called Julie. That's not cool. And I miss
Julie.
Brian. Shout out to
Oh.
Julie if she's watching. Shout out.
What's
No,
up, Julie?
no, I miss Brian. Like Brian, Brian's one of my all-time favorite human beings. And so like just getting together at festivals, like it's an exhausting like week, and there's highs and there's lows and there's emotions. But like some of my favorite times are like just hanging out with Brian outside of a hotel, or like putting our feet in a hot tub at like 2 a.m. when you're not supposed to be in there. Or, you know, getting up at catering at 8 a.m. or whatever, and just having those moments with the person that like you get to, a person that you love being with and sharing moments with. And we've got good stories to tell, but I miss having Brian part of that. So.
Yeah. And those, because those weeks are not without their hiccups. We had briefly before the show touched on perhaps a person who shall not be named, but was a difficult customer that we had at one of the festivals we worked on.
We know it wasn't Garth Brooks.
It wasn't Garth Brooks.
Because he is not taking any of our offers. That's why.
Yeah, we can't afford Garth Brooks. But we can, you know, just a little inside baseball for everybody. You want to maybe talk about that one fateful, crazy night that we had?
There's a quick little setup story, and then we won't say her name.
Okay.
Because I value my spot in this business. Anyways, we had this very famous comedian that was headlining for us one night, and we were providing a hotel room for her down in San Diego. And so they call and they're like, she is a bit of a hotel snob. And I'm like, cool. We have her at like the Four Seasons or whatever. Like, she's going to be cool. They're like, okay, but does it have a soaking tub? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And they're like, okay, well, it needs to be a soaking tub. And I'm like, okay. So I literally had to have our head of like VIP operations fly down from Napa, go to this resort, take a picture of the tub to get her to sign off on it. Right. And it was like, ended up being like $3,000 more that was in the budget. We had to kick out one of our influencers so she could have her soaking tub, whatever. So that was here. We had Aerosmith was headlining. And like before I started following Pearl Jam around back in the day, like Aerosmith was the band I had seen the most times. So actually getting to book Aerosmith was a really big deal. And like all I wanted from like the time we booked them in October to the time the show played the following September is like dream on. Like he's going to bring out the grand piano. Like, I can't believe I got to be a part of this. This is every dream coming true. And Brian's standing next to me. And right as they leave for the encore, my phone just starts blowing up. And I'm like, guys, I know everyone you want me to be with you during Dream On, but stop. And they're like, no, you've got to go to the back gate. She is stranded there. I'm like, okay. I'm like, Brian, you got your golf cart keys? And Brian's like, I do. I'm like, all right. So we roll around the entire racetrack in the middle of the night, and we get back to the gate, and they're like, oh, yeah, she's in the black Escalade, and she went that way. So Brian and I now take it to the parking lot where, if you know, hey, this is the land of Uber and whatnot, right? So there's about 20 black Escalades lined up because now Aerosmith just finished Walk This Way, and 30,000 people are walking this way towards the parking lot.
Yeah.
So Brian, you're knocking on every window, like, is she in here? Is she in here? And finally, one of the drivers like, oh, she went that way. So cool. So we get back in the golf cart and we drive around, and she's in there. And I'm like, cool. So I go knock because I try to put a personal face on it and greet everyone. There's I got to meet some really great new cool people and comedians I love. And I'm like, hey, I'm Adam, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, like I'm paying you a lot of money. And she was like our fill-in for a headliner that night. And it's like last minute. And she's like, just like totally didn't like some of the toughest comedians in the world have been just at least fake nice to me. And she was not. And there was another comedian in with her who he played earlier in the day. I'm like, hey, I loved your Star Wars bit, whatever. And he's like, okay. And like, you just feel the vibe. I'm like, yeah, wow, okay, like we got it. Wow. Okay. So then like she finds out that we had someone else doing her introduction, and she just like starts freaking out. And we're like, well, you never told us that this is completely news to us. And I go to our production manager, I go to yell at our production manager, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It wasn't advanced. So she goes up on stage, and you know, this is a high-end crowd that sits down front. And a couple of our sponsors were kind of stage left. And they start talking a little bit. Well, this comedian was not in a good mood to start with. And when these people start talking, boy, she just lets them have it. And it's like, listen, man, like it's not an easy gig. Like you're playing at midnight at a festival after Aerosmith, 2,000 people that have been at a festival drinking all day. You got to roll with it though. You know what I mean? Like if Dana Carvey can do it and everyone else can do it, you can too. Like you just ignore it. But she wouldn't ignore these people. So she let them have it. And then she walked away for a second, and she started doing a bit about sunset tan, Well, it turns out that one of this lady in the front row's clients was Sunset Tan. So this lady turns to her husband and was like, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And then Sarah, sorry, she will not be named, just loses it on this lady. And so like literally the next half an hour of her set was just her berating these people. And like she literally like sits down in front of them and just is berating them. I'm like, this is like one of the most unprofessional things I have ever seen. So anyways, she wraps it up and I go backstage to say goodbye, whatever. And she has a driver waiting for her, figuring she's going to go back to the very fancy hotel. So I'm going to make a comment about how we go out of our way. And she's like, see you guys later. I'm going home. Gets in her truck and has a driver take her back to LA. She never stepped foot in that hotel that she made such a fuss about. And so now everyone at that festival, we never ever say her name. She is now just simply she who shall not be named. And we boycott everything she does because I was shocked at, we were all just up like we have bad days. You know what I mean? Like we all have bad days, but like that's just like, wow. Yeah. Anywho, that's our she who shall not be named.
I'll add in the middle of all of that, while she was on the rant, I like couldn't take it really. It was too awkward. So I went outside. So Kaboo builds, or I don't know if you guys do it anymore, but there was like a comedy club at the fairgrounds that was built in like a hangar. So you're inside. So I went outside. Shout out to our
team. They take this hangar and make it feel like an intimate comedy club.
It's cool.
That's awesome.
Really, it's incredible. Yeah.
And so I went outside just to get a breath of air after all the searching for Sarah or whoever shall not be named. And I get outside and there is a helicopter with shining a spotlight down right above me. And I was just like, that is very strange. I look kind of peek through the security fence and I can see like cops in riot gear, like pushing people out. And I admittedly was just like, I'm going to call that not my problem. And just went inside. Like, and I think I maybe mentioned it to Raj, like, hey, you got some riot gear.
There's an incident over here. Aisle 2.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on, but there's apparently some insurgency happening, which was basically, like we were saying, like 7,000 people trying to see Snoop Dogg in a different hangar, but only 4,000 people could go in there. So it was just kind of like one of those classic music industry nights that we all miss in these days of craziness.
It's funny because that touches on like a number of things that I think about a lot. And what the first one that's like kind of unrelated to booking stuff, but I've always, I mean, from the days of working in clubs and then and even like playing, man, the assholes stick with you forever. Like it just, those are the stories. Like a person can be chill and cool and it's always like, man, you'll always respect them. The even if you're having a bad night, the assholes stick with you. And I mean, from late nights in venues that I've worked in, or even like just stories telling as a musician, there is a very famous Chicago musician who I've had a couple of encounters with, and other people have too, where it's just, I never hear positive stories about the guy. Anytime his name comes up, it's immediately like, I met that guy once. He was an asshole. And let me tell you about how he was an asshole to me. Steven Tyler, on the other hand, I met and said the coolest thing ever to me in a very awkward meeting once, where I somehow ended up at some weird Rolling Stone party in Nashville. And we were hanging out for a while and Steven Tyler was there and I might have had a little bit too much to drink. And he was, you know, it was really small. It was upstairs at the, Acme.
Yeah.
You remember that place?
Yeah.
Like way upstairs. And I started talking to him and I was probably too drunk to talk to Steven Tyler, and told him something about how like in junior high, they used to do slow dances back to back at junior high dances for Crying and Crazy. And he just looked at me and he goes, so I said something like stupid, like, oh, thanks for the tunes, man. And he goes, thanks for the libido. And then turned around. I was like, fuck yeah, Steven Tyler.
There you go, Steven Tyler.
But he might be a nightmare person too. I don't know, but he wasn't that night. And that, like, I don't know. I'm babbling, but
he should have said that story is amazing and completed the trilogy of Alicia Silverstone videos. But anyways,
But the other thing, like just getting into kind of the climate now, one of the things that touches on that I think about with our clients a lot now too, are the things that people don't think about that go into shows, right? Or the costs of shows, like a soaking tub. You know, I wonder what some of that stuff is going to look like when we gradually come back or things come back. And as somebody who's working and buying in multiple clubs and stuff, maybe that's a jumping off point. What do you think? How do you think that, like, do you think the structures of deals and all of that, have you already been noticing that, like, wow, there's a lot that needs to fundamentally change? And some of it, it might be because of COVID and how it's impacted us, but also, man, were things getting inflated? It's a loaded question, but
there's a lot of levels of that question to unpack. But, here's what I keep saying, everyone. This is what I have to believe, or if not, I just end up in the corner in the fetal position, crying and drinking too much bourbon. Do that anyways. But I really believe that you're right. The prices that you would pay for bands just got so inflated. And booking a festival, I essentially had like 4, maybe 5 agents that I would call. So there was no competition. And it was a real like pain in the ass. And I really believe on the other side of this, and it's going to be a long, dark tunnel to get there. And that's the scary part, because I don't know who's going to be able to survive this long, dark tunnel. But on the other side, I think these giant agencies, I think, are going to break up. And I think some of these promoters, I don't know if Ticketmaster is going to last through this whole thing. Who knows? I think you're going to see it's going to be the independents are going to be like Phoenix is rising from the ashes. I really believe that. But I don't think nothing is going to be real until I think we're back at full speed. And I think, these drive-ins, I think it's interesting, but it's not the same as jumping up and down at a Bruce Springsteen concert. It's just not the same. And it's also hard to route those tours, and the economics are different. It's like a stopgap. I feel like it's a Band-Aid. So, what worried me, what chilled me to the bone this week is when, we all knew Coachella wasn't happening. There's not going to be festivals this year. But when Coachella said, we're actually not sure we'll be at full capacity by April of next year, that's wow. Because, first it was okay, we're going to cancel some shows in March and April. We'll move into May and June. Cool. Then it was sacrifice the spring to save the summer. And then you start moving the summer shows to the fall. And then now it's I have calendars filled simply because I want to give my night staff hope that there's going to be money to be made. But and you have your contingency plans, do we open at, half capacity? But out here in California, they're very adamant about concerts aren't going to happen until stage 4. Right. They're talking about social distancing on stage. They're talking about people in I think as a restaurant, sure, you can open at half capacity, but I don't think it makes economic sense for a venue to do it. I think what you would have to do, I saw a 29-page guideline that you have to do. And it was how does an independent club that has 300 people, how can you afford that kind of staffing and all the things that you have to do? And then the liability, because what if that person shows up and gets sick? What if a guy at the table next to him coughs and all of a sudden they get COVID? Maybe it's not even their fault, but it's pretty major liability you're asking venues to take on as well. So I want to be an optimist. And there's some people, I have, people on one side of me tell me, dude, we're working in July. Don't you worry about it. We're booking the fall. But I have a lot more realists and people higher up that have more money invested in the game that are we're not probably touching this until next year. And even next year still feels kind of iffy. So, and then the other problem with this, I think it's just from a booking standpoint, is a lot of these guys are just, okay, we'll take our 2020 tour and we're moving to 2021. So which is great if you had a really great lineup or a run of shows in 2020. But if you didn't, say you had a 3-day festival and one of the days was selling kind of light, and if you could get a chance to do it all over again, you're yeah, I would get rid of that and let me bring in someone new. But those bands are, no one's, it's Weezer, Motley Crue, Jackson Browne, they're all touring next year doing the same tours. And so it's not like you're all of a sudden going to have a whole brand new slate of bands to choose from. So this next year is going to be really, really interesting. And I think, I really love dark timelines in sci-fi movies. And so I'm fascinated by where we're living right now, but I have a 3-year-old who's right outside this window. And I'm freaked out as a parent because it's how do I provide for him? And what is my future? We had a pretty good run going, my wife and I live a half block from the beach in Hermosa, and we drive nice cars. And I think if anything for us, this pause gave us a reason to be you know what, we want to dial life back a little bit and we want to simplify it because this became too much work to maintain this stuff. So it's been good, spiritually for us, but at the same time, it can get really overwhelming. My wife is in the event business and she does weddings, and like, wow, brides are just crazy as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But now tell them that they can't have a wedding, or that their guests have to wear face masks for their pictures. Oh shit, it's off the wow. So between the two of us, like, it's a pretty crazy time. And so I really do believe, though, a couple years from now, I can't wait for that, because I do think we're going to shake things up. And I think the prices that the agents were like demanding for bands out on top of a bill, because Brian, you know this, like, when we start out booking like a major festival where for 40,000 people, like, you have like a list of probably 20 bands, and you start working your way down that list. And like, once they start, like, we had No Doubts, I think probably last hour show as of this point, and like these different bands, but like, they're not making new No Doubts right now. Like the other part of this world that we live in. Do you mind if I ramble a little bit more?
No, go for it.
So we had Brian Wilson at Beach Life last year, and this music critic that I know from the LA Times, an old friend, says, you need to stop booking old guys like that, and you need to find like the new Brian Wilson. And I'm like, there is no new Brian Wilson. Right. I mean, no disrespect to younger generation, but think about the atmosphere that the Beach Boys came out in. Like, there was 5 radio stations. Like, if you made it on the radio, then you were everywhere. And it's the same thing with MTV. Like, if you had a hit on MTV, as Brian knows, we can fill our clubs with Berlin and all of these bands that had a couple radios, because everyone in America watched MTV. It was America's radio station, and at the time. But once it started breaking up, bands get a lot more exposure, but there's no one that has like that mass anymore. So you could be like the biggest band in the world, but like, I can't name an Ed Sheeran song. Like, right. I know who he is. I know he's huge, and if he wants to play my festival, I'll give him a lot of money. But like, I can't name a song, because it doesn't reach my little bubble. We all live in our own little bubbles right now. So it's a really interesting time. So to bring that back to the festival side, there's only so many bands that can appeal to a 40,000 person festival. Yes, you have the Bonnaroos and stuff if you go more of a niche thing, but even those guys booked U2, which, you know, imagine the first couple years of Bonnaroo, you're like, fuck you, U2's not going to play here. Right. And that you couldn't imagine that. So I think what Kaboo was great is, you know, my favorite year of Kaboo, man, we had, it was Red Hot Chili Peppers on night 1, Pink up against Muse on night 2, and then Tom Petty closing one of his last ever shows on night 3. Like, to me, that was like, that checked every box. Sure. But you can't, there's not another Pink. Like, we did Katy Perry the next year, and she was not Pink.
Right.
And so like, you need females, and you try to help more females out. But, and, you know, so you've got, you know, at the alt rock level, there's the Chili Peppers, there's Pearl Jam, and there's Foo Fighters, you know. Then it takes a step down to the Muse, Dave Matthews, et cetera, of the world. And maybe, you know, Killers and stuff. And there's another step below that. But there's only, you know, yes, Rage Against the Machine happens to reunite every 15 years. But talk about the headache of security and stuff you need for those mosh pits. There's only so many of those bands. And so it's, from a booking standpoint, it's a little crazy to be like, okay, well, there's only so many headliners now. And they know, you know, when you're the Foo Fighters, you know you're the Foo Fighters. You're like, yeah, I'm going to rock your face. I'm going to play the hits, and people are going to love us. And so they are worth every penny that they get. But like, you can't do the Foo Fighters every year. And the other thing, as you build a festival, you're building on each previous year's lineup, right? So like, you know, at Kaboo, they're like, why didn't you book the Chili Peppers again? You're like, well, said the Chili Pepper fan who came last year and now follows on social media. You're like, well, if I did that every year, we'd be the Red Hot Chili Peppers festival.
Right.
So you have to find ways that makes the Chili Peppers fan happy, while at the same time evolving and bringing people under your tent, which is the other half of it. Then you have to give people an experience. So maybe it's not their favorite headliner, but man, that comedy show is incredible. And I got to see like 3 top chefs do a cooking demonstration, and the bourbon was amazing. And there's an art show. Like, you have to give people more than just a stage and music if you really want to have a mass appeal.
That was like the most fascinating thing about Kaboo for me, was like, when Kaboo started, it was right when everybody was talking about the festival bubble is going to burst. Like, and they're still talking about it, and it probably still will. But like, it was like, how are we adding all these festivals? How are we doing this? And Kaboo ended up making it so much more about the experience than the music. You know, it's not a dirty field, and you're in line. There's no porta potties, and you know, if you have the means, you can have a cabana by a pool and watch Fall Out Boy on the main stage. You know, like, it's a completely different way of looking at it. Do you think, and like, I don't know how you guys have experienced it since I left, but in my life since then, and I kind of noticed it when I was working at Madison, that it seemed like concert attendance was kind of steadily going down a little bit in overall, like in general. There are certain bands that still do well. There's certain things that still do well, but it just seemed like it was getting harder and harder, especially like for me, like to continue to get people to go out to shows and experience live music. Do you think that like new approach is going to be part of the reopening for venues? Like, are any of your venues thinking about like different ways to monetize this? Like, if you can't have a show with 300 people, but we can have 50 people in there and we can provide them with this, and this, you know, like VIP packages or whatever. Has there been any talk like that amongst your venues?
I mean, it's hard because look, man, you know this. We've got clubs that have been open for 30 some years and are do business a certain way and have made money doing it that certain way. So, you know, I remember, you know, bands, once the bands figured out they could charge for a meet and greet, like meet and greets used to be something that we would call the manager and say, hey, we're having a hard time. We're 100 tickets shy. Can we do 20 tickets? Next people buy 20 tickets, get a meet and greet. And they would be like, sure. Like meet and greets are things that help was a promotional tool. Now meet and greets are how bands make money. And so, you know, and I get it, like the cost goes up. Like our problem, like the Coach House, it's a 500 cap room, right? Our walls haven't gotten bigger. There's no way to expand those walls. So if a band that we've been playing for, you know, 20 years wants to make more money, the only real way to do that is to keep raising ticket price. But like you can only charge so much for the tubes or so much for Berlin. So you incrementally do that. So then how else can a band make money? Well, they can sell their VIP meet and greets or whatever. But then as a venue, you're like, well, wait a minute, you wouldn't be doing this without me in this venue. And now you want me to open a half an hour early, and that's a cost. So I want to get cut in on it. And the bands are like, no, you know? So it's really hard to finding the other, like, I can't tell you how many people are like, hey, we want to come use your venue now that it starts to stream. And I'm like, cool, how do we make money?
Right.
Well, we don't know. You tell us. I'm like, we don't know. Like, we haven't cracked this nut yet. Like, we know it's a problem. We know it's a mystery, but like, we don't know what it is yet. So, you know, to your point, yeah, I think on a festival, you can, like, thing about festivals, like the more VIP levels you do, there's always a guy that wants the more. You know what I mean? Like especially like Kabu. It was like one MB, and you remember MB. She said to me one day, she said, you know, our VIP tickets, the level 1 VIP, are those guys that live in LA and they lease a 3 Series BMW. They just want to be above that. And I'm like, hey, I live in LA and lease a 3 Series BMW, and you're totally right. Like, I don't want to be with like the general admission. I want to be a step up, right? But then there's like a step above that, because there's people that want to be like above that level. And then you're like, wait a minute, what if we do like the ultimate, like a 4th level VIP? And we did that the last couple of years. Where all of a sudden you have like your own concierge, and like you're hanging out with Lance Bass and you're doing crazy stuff, and people loved it. And so like, you know, but then your problem is Brian, you've seen this. All of a sudden now a band is performing to the left side of the field is like 5,000 VIPs, because you can't have everyone be a VIP. And the other side is 25,000 regular people. And boy, that's kind of an awkward way to perform, because it's really loud over here. And these people over here are like, you know, and you know how rich people are at concerts. Half the time they're just talking. They're there to be there and be seen more so than like walk their faces off. So it makes a really weird thing. So it's like, how do you make everyone? You don't want to put just the entire front of the stage be VIP, because then you lose the energy of the real fan. So I don't know, man. It's a real... I think we're in for some. I think I said this before this. I think the niche festivals, like what we do at Beach Life, right? Like if you can find a community that loves music, and you only need to sell 10,000 tickets, or whether it be a community, whether it be a certain demographic, whatever, like that to me is the future. It becomes a localized, like, okay, like, you know, this year at Beach Life, before it went, you know, before the pandemic hit, we had like the Marley kids. Ziggy and Steven were going to do an entire set of Bob Marley for his 75th birthday. We had Ben Harper in front of that. We had Kobe Calais in front of that. And then UB40 with them. Like, that is beach life. Like, that is like, think about living in Southern California beach, boom. But like when you're trying to then appeal to 40,000 people, that wouldn't work, right? I mean, that's a very... You
basically have to do 4 of those in 3 days in the same spot. Yeah.
Right. And so how do you know, anyway, so it's trying to figure out, like, I feel like those little... But then it's a different level of bands. Like you're, you know, again, the bands that play Beach Life are bands that headline like the Greek Theater. Yeah. It's not bands that headline Staples Center. So a Greek Theater is a 6,000 ticket thing. And now you're asking a band to headline your festival that usually is worth 6,000 tickets in the market to bring in 10,000 people, you know, and yes, you're building a lineup around them. But, you know, we learned that year we had Jimmy Buffett at Kabu. All the Jimmy Buffett people were like, okay, great. Where's my seat? I'm used to a reserved seat, and where can I go and do my Parrot Head parking lot party? And we're like, oh no, we don't have reserved seats. It's a festival. And the parking lot's just reserved for parking. And then come inside, you know? And so that's why we kind of really never did the Grateful Dead a lot, because the Grateful Dead just have their own world. You know, you can't do Shakedown Street really. I mean, yes, Bonnaroo could, sure. But, you know, and those fans don't like to pay a lot of money, and they dance around and they smell. God bless them. I love the Dead, but, you know, who doesn't love patchouli? Anyways, so yeah, it's a weird thing, man. And like, is it clubs that are, so I keep questioning, I love y'all's opinion. Like, what is the future? Is it these 300, 500 person clubs? Because, you know, they're not making, like, again, to the previous point, you could take a band that played on MTV, had 3 hits, and they can still fill an independent club for 20 years after, right? But like, there is no place like that anymore. So you almost have to get super niche about what you're doing. But like, there's bands that will all come up on Spotify that like blow my mind. Like, for instance, I had a American Aquarium. Like, I love BJ and those guys, right? And I had them at Kaboo, and I walked to BJ afterwards. And like, hey, I'm the guy that booked you. And he's like, I have no idea how we ended up at a festival in Del Mar. Like, thank you. Like, how did you hear about me? I'm like, well, my wife right here, she was driving home, and on Spotify came up, I'm Not Going to the Bar Tonight, which is a great song. She's like, she said, you have to hear this band. And I heard it. And I'm like, holy shit, I love this band. Got into them, and they've played multiple Kaboos for me. I booked them at clubs, and BJ's been really cool. But like, what a random thing that my wife happened to be on a Spotify algorithm that brought her home to tell me that she knew I would like this band, and I've got to help him out and do some cool things.
And I mean, that band's an interesting example too, because I mean, I've played with them a couple of times, and I mean, for years, they've been playing like 300 shows a year forever. I mean, like really hardcore road dogs, which kudos to them, because that's a hard thing to do. But I think what you were talking about, I mean, I work in niche markets, and it's interesting to think that, like, okay, so in the world that I book in the jazz world, you know, there are definitely those festivals that are niche festivals that are the highlights of the year that we think, that's the future. You know, these festivals that are based in, you know, in Knoxville, and it's in every venue, or even Brian, what you do with Mission Creek, where it's in these venues. But one of the things that I keep seeing is like, okay, and that I'm curious about how this pandemic will affect is it gets to the point where cost starts to make less and less sense, because, you know, bands' revenue streams have dried up. And so they're turning to touring to make up, you know, the lion's share, and you know, without even being able to sometimes focus on things like merch like they should. You know, they're looking at like this ticket sale, and when you think of all the levels that go into that, you know, when you're talking about 300 cap rooms, it's not a ton of money. Nope. And you can only charge so much. And I think to what you were saying before about some of the bigger acts, I'm rambling. I was thinking about this the other summer when you were talking about how, you know, there's not another Red Hot Chili Peppers or Pink. Well, one of the things that I think about is if you look at these huge tours, or the tours that are able to gross that much or draw that much. I went to see ELO. It was to sit in the balcony. It was amazing. It cost me like, you know, $300 to get 2 tickets. And when I was young and going to concerts and going to see like Radiohead when I was younger, you know, it was $30 to go see a show. The costs have gone up so much just as a fan. So who are you appealing to? Well, if you look at these high grossing tours, it's like baby boomers or parents with kids, right? I mean, it seems to me, I'm just
and as a parent with kids, it's really hard to go out. I mean, that's our thing. Like with some of our festivals, like we think there's a demo of like 35 to 45-year-olds that still want to live and rock. But again, as a parent, we go out to a fraction of the shows that we used to. And like to get them to go to a 3-day festival, you can get them to do 1 day, maybe 2 days. But how do you give up soccer and find a babysitter for 3 days of a weekend? Like it's pretty much impossible. But like that's kind of who this crowd now. And this crowd also now finally has. Like I remember, like gosh, it was 10 years ago. I think we went and saw a Def Leppard, Cheap Trick, and Poison, which is like right on. Like my wife's from Rockford, right? Like we love Cheap Trick. Like that was like literally the perfect concert for us. And thank God I had a friend at Live Nation that got us good seats. And I remember getting there and the seats in the orchestra, I looked at my ticket, it was $130. I'm like, I can't afford this, and I am your demo. Like, this is my concert. So you're going to make me go sit way up in the lawn if I had to pay? Like, that's not the experience. Like, that's not why I go to shows. I go to have that connection. Yes, people, the average guy goes in the lawn, smokes a bowl, has some beers, and just has fun. But I think the three of us here are like actual music fans, and we want to be close, and we want to be more engaged. And so when you're pricing me out, it was like, wow, that's kind of crazy.
And I kind of think that that's been, you see that trickling down a little bit too, where it's like, okay, so when you talk about these smaller clubs, you know, I've seen it more and more, and even as an agent, where it's like, wow, to make this show work, we have to charge like $50 tickets. And you know, I think that that's really, really tough for a lot of people. You know, I think about how many shows are missed because people have to pick the one that they want to go to in the summer, or you know, and I think that's why festivals got so big. Is it's like, well, I could just put that money here. And so now when things are kind of coming back, right? Or not that they are coming back, but thinking about when they do come back, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot as an agent is, what are the costs of these shows and what is reality? Because I know what we ask for, and I think some of it rightly so, but when you cut down what we can bring in from a 300 cap room or a 200 cap room, and before you open the door, you know, the venues have been talking about the costs that they have just to open after this thing before even booking a show. But then what am I going to ask you to add on to that? Backline and hotel rooms and a huge rider and all of this stuff, and then cut capacity and up ticket prices even more from where they are. That makes me really scared as a music fan. It makes me scared. And so
real fast, like when bands show up without merch to sell, I'm like, you're insane. Like, even as an opening local band, I'm like, this is why I put you on this show in front of 300 people. You better have T-shirts made and CDs. It was like, I'm helping you like bring your merchandise, you know.
Right.
And talking about that, like I've also seen like the old 97s have become really good friends of mine, and I watch Rhett Miller every night go to that merch stand, and he talks to people, and I was one of those people that he talked to 20 years ago, and like, he had a connection and he signed a thing for me. And the next time I came back, he signed a thing for me. And now I've booked them at like festivals everywhere. I've done all these crazy things, but it started with him just having a moment at the merch stand and then remembering it. And then like, it takes an extra hour of work, but it's investing in your future. And if you can make an extra $1,000 in merch sales, you know, like that's how you get that gas money or get those hotel rooms. So you know, I can't tell you enough to emphasize the bands, even as a promoter. It's like, listen, we have walls that can't move, and it's, you know, 300 people I can get in here, but now I've got security and I'm paying for, you know, Facebook ads and I'm paying for print ads, and I don't work for free, and my box office doesn't work for free. And I'm like, we have very legitimate costs. So if it costs me $2,000 to open my door at a 300 cap room, then you're going to pay a band $3,000. Okay, well, that's $5,000 we're all on the hook for. And usually we're the ones that are on the hook for it, right? So, so 500 times, if it's a guaranteed sellout, okay, I can charge $25 and we make 7,500, and the band maybe gets cut in on the back end. But what if that show only does 200 paid? All of a sudden, you know, we're breaking even, or the show the night before doesn't do well. And like, and so now you're going to talk about how do we then shrink that capacity, or already, you know, paper thin margins, and you're going to have to bring in a cleaning crew instead of once a week. Like, you know, when you're at a club, like I love the smell of it after it hasn't been cleaned in 6 weeks. Like there's something, or 6 days, but now you're gonna have to literally clean it every single night. Well, that's expensive. You know,
I talked to a venue this week who said that they were, you know, Brian, what I was talking to you about at the top, one of the things that they were saying is they hired a mitigation staff member, and for their shows are going to have people that are ready to clean the bathroom almost every time it's used. And it's just this thing. So as they walk through, and I kudos to them for really trying to figure it out. And I think that they're planning some interesting things. But the two things that really hit me hard are, okay, well, we are going to start out by cutting capacity and maybe trying to add 2 shows, right? So we're hoping it's 100 cap room. They're going to do 2 shows at 40 tickets. So we're hoping 80 people want to come to this, first gamble in this climate, right? So just to do that, then to try to figure out ways to make it work, hire a camera crew, stream the show. Well, now you're gambling again because you're saying, I think people are going to pay for this stream. Sure, but this is and I think that that's a great, model, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet. So it's all of this stuff that it is a big gamble. And I like that people are being creative and trying to think of ways to do it, but it's really hard to try to tell, storied bands or people that do this, like, hey, basically you can't have an offer. There's not going to be a guarantee. It's going to be this really small percentage and maybe something over here on this stream, but we don't know what that looks like yet.
And how can you route a tour that way?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And then what happens if a couple of those markets along the way, all of a sudden the county steps in and says, nope, no shows.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting thing to watch, but there is in trying to be kind of an optimist, it does make me think of some of the fat that's been around, that if and how this comes back, like, wow, there are other revenue streams to think of. Like this streaming live show thing, that is another revenue stream to take advantage of. I don't know. I'm babbling, but there has to be some lessons to be learned. And some of it has to be like, especially putting it on some of the bands as well, because, the whole community's needed to raise this thing back up. But to be able to put on some of the bands, like, well, we got to get some of these costs under control, because you don't need a soaking tub if you're not going to use it.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I think the music business is a lot like, I think, America right now. Like this is the time for somebody to actually get creative. Like the old paradigm isn't working, whether it be politics in America, the economy, or the music business. It's not working, and it's not going to be able to sustain. So you have these X amount of people that keep saying, no, we're going to make it great again, and we're going to go back to the way it was. But like it didn't work then, and it's really not going to work now. So now we need a leader, and we need somebody to get creative, and it's not drive-in concerts. It's just like there's got to be some other way to do this. So how do we finally figure out streaming and make it work? Someone's got to, grab it by the horns. And then to the other point, it's like, what is our future? Like, how do we route tours now? How do we, my biggest thing is like when I'll actually talk to an artist and sit down, or a manager, like there's such a divide. And I understand why an agent wants to like be between, because you have a job to do and you have to show what you're worth. But there's sometimes like a lack of communication. Like I was talking to Rhett Miller one night and he was like, well, my new album has like 3 female singing parts on it. So I needed to have a female on tour with me. But like that was never communicated to me. This is an old agent, not his current agent, who I love. But like all of a sudden, like he has to bring this girl with him on the show. And I'm like, and you're asking for like how much money? Like she doesn't add anything to this. And I could go from him being a 200-person show, but if I got to add support, it's a 300-person show. He's hitting bonuses. I'm hitting, I'm making money. I need to put him on a Saturday night. But you're like handicapping me. But no one told me it's an artistic reason for doing it or whatever. If they would have presented it that way, we probably would have found a middle ground. So to me, it's like that the communication and maybe I think part of it is because when you're like the CAA festival guy, like your email is just overflowing. There isn't time to actually pause and be like, hey, this is why these costs are what they are. Let's have a talk about it. And so I'm hoping now that if these things kind of splinter a little bit and there's more, we can actually, like, I know for a fact, like when I'm booking a 300-person room in Hermosa Beach 6 nights a week, and you're filling an Orange County room for 4 nights a week, like sometimes each show doesn't get the attention it deserves. But maybe we can kind of slow things down a little bit, and we can kind of focus on these things and actually have more communication of like, that's how we're going to get over these humps and say, yeah, listen, I understand what your costs are for routing this tour, but I want you to also understand, don't just tell me, well, you get the bar, so therefore, pay me more money. Like, but dude, there's waiters and wait staff, and like there's a bar manager, and there's insurance, and I have to, if the ABC comes, like, are you gonna help me pay for that insurance if an underage kid drinks? Like, yeah, let's put it all on the table and let's find a way that we can all benefit. If the show does well, we all make money.
And I think that's a really great point, because I think for a long time in this business, it's this adversarial relationship between everybody. Everybody's kind of thinking like everybody walks into it thinking I'm getting screwed. Right. And so I just have to figure out how to get less screwed. But there are definitely times where like our approach is, I just want to be honest. Like I can be honest about our costs. Can you be honest about yours? I mean, and then there are so many times where like I'll get something from a venue where it's like, you have like, hundreds of dollars in your budget for people to load the band out or for loaders or something. We're not using them. They're not there. We don't need them, but you try to get that caught because everything's, it's all accounting. It's all this different stuff. But to be able to have honest conversations going forward and across the board seems like a good place to start.
Right,
I know
yeah.
that sounds simple, but
But like also from an independent room, like sometimes, we need the good shows to help pay for the weekday bad shows. And sometimes there's 50 extra tickets that might get sold on that Saturday because I was able to take a chance on someone but then the band on Saturday. So like, wait a minute, that's not fair to me. I'm like, but I'm talking about the grand economy of an independent club. There's a way that we have to kind of do things in order to actually exist and allow you to keep coming and playing here multiple times a year. But you're right. So like, how do we talk through that and say, I will find ways to get this for you? But, I'm going to take care of one of your things. He was like, if I go to you, Ryan, and I say, okay, man, I'll give you one of your up and coming bands on Wednesday, but on that Saturday night, I'm going to have one of your sellout bands and I might sell 50 extra tickets to help cover the Wednesday band. But is that fair to the Saturday band? Probably not. But to you and I's relationship, it's like, hey, man, I want to help you get as many shows as I can. And I've got to find a way to stay in business.
Yeah, I think that speaks to like a music industry culture issue that we kind of have. Like Ryan was touching on it, where, how many times have you talked to an agent or a buyer or someone and they're like, man, I booked that band for just like $500 and we sold, X amount of tickets. And it's like, yeah, you hit well, but like you're basically bragging about how you made more money than you should have. And the other way around, agents will be like, I got this club and, Oxford, Mississippi to give my band $2,000 and, they didn't make any money, but hey, we got $2,000. I think one thing that this whole pandemic might do is instill, I hope it does, is instill a better sense of community around this, around the business aspect of it. I think musicians have always kind of had a good community around themselves and like, we're kind of all in this together. But, the business side of it, I think could use a touch of that too, of like you're saying, like, let's communicate better. Let's be more honest and let's like try to help each other out as opposed to wring money out.
Well, and one thing that I think agents could definitely do, and I think about this a lot, is that, and I think this touches on what Adam, what you were talking about at the top, is agents used to build bands. Agents used to know how to build a band, and that was important.
They were loyal to promoters back in the day too. Don't forget, they were loyal. In those days, a promoter of record was a thing.
Yes, exactly. And now it's kind of like this soft ticket nonsense where it's just like, I just want to build up festivals to be able to get as much as I can, but not really focus or pay attention on how that's building markets or how that's building, hard tickets. And I think that does a huge disservice to like the whole community, because that's how you get people to be whatever the next big band is. Like, it's not just some band you saw at a festival, and the festival experience, while I love it, isn't the same as you want that band that killed at your festival to come back and play your club. You want that. You want to see that turn into hard tickets, and you want it to turn into a thing. You want to know that you can have American Aquarium every year or twice a year. You want to have that relationship.
I'll give you the money for that big festival play, but I need you to return it. And also, just from an artistic, you talk about like Bruce Springsteen or Garth Brooks. If you cut your teeth in the clubs and you play to 0 people and to 5 people, and you become a better performer, and I think a lot of them are more grateful versus like, I showed up to San Diego at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday and played to 10,000 people. They're like, but you had nothing to do with that. Like, they were there to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and they decided to get in early and not, have to wait in line. Well, so to your point, but that's a great play though for those people.
But then not only that, but to play that festival and then turn around and be like, and I got paid, really well to play that festival. So why, when I can't come back, is my club offer lower? I don't get it. I got paid, I got paid more to play that festival. And it's like, well, yeah, of course you did.
I would say, like, we'll give you a very fair offer. Like, I will, like, here's our numbers. You know what I mean? Like, you can only sell so many tickets, and tickets can only be so expensive. So again, work with me here. Like, let's find a way. Like, come sell out my club. Like, build demand. Play that festival where you get early exposure, and we build on that. We come play the club, and oh my goodness, now that club play actually sold out because you went and did that. And then let's keep building you. The next time you come through on a festival, let's move you to a better spot. I mean, we booked the Revivalists' first ever like festival play at Kaboo, and those guys have gone on to pretty cool stuff. I booked the Killers' first ever Orange County play, and they played a lot of our festivals. But like trying to get them back a second time, some of these bands I don't know, like the back, but also back in the day, like Gary Faulkner, as Brian knows, he owns the Coach House, and he's just old school. And that guy has a couch in his office, and he's 79 years old and will sleep on his couch if he doesn't want to drive home, because he is just there every night and he pinches pennies. But like the bands know him and they love him. Like Sinead O'Connor was there a couple months ago. She's a tough cookie. Like he went and got a really good pot, and like she fell in love with Gary. And like the fact that, Brian, like imagine Sinead O'Connor and Gary Faulkner in the same room, right?
Yeah.
And he's telling me that night, like, oh, I'm hanging out with Sinead back here, telling me these stories. And you're like, that's insane. But like an artist appreciates that. And they look at Gary Faulkner like he's an old school guy that promotes, and he's been doing it for 30 years. And I want to keep coming back to this guy because he knows how to promote. Like to get, like if I'm on another festival, I hear more about like analytics. Like I'm an old school Gary. The only analytic that matters is tickets sold. I don't care how many exposures you got. I don't care whatever, how many tickets. The only way that proof that marketing is working is if you're actually selling tickets, because it's the only thing that matters. And if more people adopted that versus trying to sell their brand, I think artists are more grateful. Agents are more grateful. We want to give you the best play possible. We want you to show up with a truck full of merchandise and sell the shit out of it. You know what I mean? Like, right. We also want to sell a lot of beer, which now imagine selling 300 people beer, then they have to go pee, and if you have to clean the bathroom every single time, you can't. So back to the square one again, you're like, we're kind of screwed right now unless we all, the idiots, just win, and we're like, screw it, we're all going to get it. Let's just build herd immunity and move on with our lives.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Oh no, I think we're all, it's scary and who knows what's going to happen. And there are all of these unknowns, but I do like the idea that it is like, it almost is like talking to a kid. It's like, communication is very important, and we all have to work together to make this, but it's true. It's fucking true. And I do hope that there is like, there are some, maybe they'll remain nameless, but there are some of these bigger companies that are falling apart. And I'm like, fucking good. You were the reason this stuff sucked, and I'll see you later. And I don't want to, as an agent, I don't want people to think that I act the way that guy acted. You know what I mean? Like that there's some toxicity that we can get rid of in this thing. And that's kind of cruel, but it's true. And, I don't know. I'll shut up. I'm bad.
This is about the time that we wrap it up. Adam, going just real quickly, what do you think the timeline is, and what are you guys looking at, just so we can kind of like what's the earliest show you have on the books that you have moderate confidence in?
Well, first of all, I was just getting warmed up. It was like a Bruce Springsteen concert. Like I thought this was just intermission. I'm kind of bummed we're cutting this so short. Honestly, like as I said earlier, like, we just keep moving shows out. And if I'm being a realist, and my glass is probably half empty, but just honestly, it's gonna be 2021. And I've got 100+ club shows booked at multiple venues, like at like 100+ Coach House shows and whatnot. But like, I don't think they're gonna play this year. And so, I moved Berlin for the 4th time, and then we have 8-1, and I'm like, I talked to the agent. I'm like, okay, so I think, if we're being safe, we should just move it to December. And he's like, you already have a December date booked with her. I'm like, well, we're probably just going to have to, And even then December is kind of scary. Like, I hope I'm wrong. Like, I really hope, I feel like there's this groundswell of people that just don't care anymore and just want to get back to life. But I think if 1 million people die, that it's going to be very sobering, and it's going to regress. So sadly, and that's what I remember when this whole thing started in March, every agent or promoter I talked to, I'd be like, okay, what's your over under? 4th of July was kind of the over under for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, that's I put the over under now is like, if we can do a New Year's Eve show, we're probably lucky. But even then, man, like, I don't know, is there gonna be a civil war? Like, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
If I woke up tomorrow, my head was stapled to the carpet, I wouldn't be surprised at this point. Like, who knows what's gonna happen in today's
Right.
world? So, like, I think there's also just so many other factors than just COVID right now. But
Yeah.
I hope that I really hope that we can be working and rocking by January 21, and that, you know, by September, October. I mean, that's the other part too. You guys know you have to do this very far in advance. You don't just book a show a week out. So, like,
Yeah.
do I go book a festival in October for, you know, May of the following year and hope it plays? Wow. And then who's
And
going
if it doesn't,
do that? Who's got money
exactly.
to do that? Yeah. So, anyways, it's kind of the weird. It's the chicken or the egg right now, but it's a real hard thing that everyone's wrestling with. Like, I want to get paid to do work. Like, I'm itching to go to work again, but
Yeah.
everyone's like, well, we're not selling tickets, we're not making money, so how can I pay you? And it's like, well, I get it, but, like, you know, anyways, it's really a scary kind of time. So I'm hoping that by January 21 we're rocking again, and I hope by October we're actually working, like, realistically. And I think the hard part too is, I think, you know, Brian, with you in Iowa, I watch your posts and it's like, wow, Iowa's a lot different world than California.
Yeah, I got asked if I wanted to play a show next week, and I
Yeah.
said no. But it was like, really? Like, you could have tried to do a show now? I mean, 50 people or whatever. But
Still, we come out here, my wife yesterday, we were in the Hermosa Beach Pier, and she started freaking out. Like, there's no social distancing, there was no masks, and you're like, we grabbed our kid and we literally ran home. And you're like, how many people are actually going to want to go into a club and sit in a smoke-filled room? And or people, like, I love to jump up and down and sing along when I go to a show. It's very off key, but it's what I do. And so, like, who's going to want to stand by me as I do that? Or what if I start coughing? Am I going to freak people out? People are going to punch me? Like, and then how do you, like, you know, like Pearl Jam? I have tickets to the 2 shows that were supposed to happen in April, and I have pit tickets. Well, are pits going to happen anymore?
Right.
I mean,
right.
yeah, part of me would really like to have that money back. But at the same time, like, they're really great seats for 2 nights of Pearl Jam, so I don't want to give them up. But, like, I don't know if there's going to be a pit anymore. So
Right.
there's just so many questions that and no one. I think the frustrating thing for everyone I talk to is, like, who's telling us where's our guidelines? Like, what do we need to know? And I understand politicians are like, listen, I don't want to tell you can open October 1st, and then October 1st gets here and you can't. So I get it, but, like, it's just, I feel like we're just flying so blind right
There's
now.
no plan.
Yeah.
There's no plan
That's
from
a really,
anywhere.
Yeah. That's a really great point. And in what we do, I mean, the people that I've talked to as a musician and as an agent, it's, you know, every venue has their own kind of idea of what they're doing and how they're going to handle it. And this ties into, like, even routing tours or where you want to play, or how people, you know, what the experience of going to shows is going to be. And it is kind of weird that there are no guidelines, or there is nobody saying maybe it should look this way. Even with capacity, you know, there's nobody saying anything. And even this, like, 6 feet kind of seems like maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
artists, like, would you want to go play to a 1,000 cap room where there's 200 people there, but they're just in little pocket? Like, that's a really weird thing to perform to. What if they can't move? What if they have to sit? Or what if they can't dance? Or, you know, from an artist perspective, it's got to be super weird. And from a promoter's perspective, it's like, I'm giving people an experience that I don't, as a music fan, I'm not sure I would. Yes, okay, if it was Bruce Springsteen, sure, I would go sit in a really awkward environment to go see him. But I wouldn't have the same show and the same connection as we normally would. And I don't know if my wife would let me leave the house to go be in front with 200 other people.
Right.
Singing along and all that's floating in the air. I would be hesitant, you know, I would be.
well, and that raises a whole other thing. And like, in playing, you're absolutely right. Like, I don't want people to get sick or be scared when they're watching me play music. I don't want to go see music if I'm sitting there anxious. But then the other thing is, like you were talking about, if all of these venues have their own kind of plans, what about the big?
This is Hudson really fast. He's just going to say hi.
Hey,
This is my
Hudson.
son.
Hi, Hudson.
They're all saying hi to you. Dad's on a little interview real fast, and I'm moving right now. Okay. That's my friend Brian. I think you might have met Brian. I don't know.
You
Anyway,
were
sorry.
very little.
You were a little baby, actually. Yes. As she who should not be named said.
But one of my questions is what's, you know, are bands going to start incorporating, you know, health things or mitigation things into their riders? I mean, that's another thing. Does it come
What if
from the
Brandon
bands?
Flowers gets COVID at your venue,
Right.
and takes out his entire tour? Boy, who's getting sued on that one? You know what I mean? And if I'm a band right now, I would most definitely be selling face coverings with my band name on it on my Facebook page and everywhere, because at least that's making some money. It's incredible the bands that aren't doing that. It shocks me. But then how do you how does I keep hearing like, why doesn't Coldplay do this big streaming thing? You're like, because Coldplay plays the Rose Bowl, right? And like, think of what it costs to do the Rose Bowl and how much money they make, but they also go play 10 other stadiums. Like, Coldplay can't make that money on a stream. And how long can Chris Martin survive without making that money? And maybe it is about lowering those things, but like, I love that Bruce Springsteen came out and was like, I'm going to throw the biggest party ever next year, and you're all invited. And you're like, that's awesome, Bruce. But we're
all going to die.
I hope you live long enough to do that. Little Steven as well. But like, I don't know. But how do you are there going to be stadium shows next year? I mean, that's, that Motley Crue Def Leppard thing. How is Mick Mars going to last that long? I pray to God he does, because I have really good seats for that. But like, I don't know. It's just, there's just the lack of leadership and the lack of if someone would just say, okay, guys, here's the steps you're going to need to eventually be open. We're like, okay, cool. But we don't have that. And it's like, and then I keep hearing in California here, they're like, oh no, like a concert isn't going to happen until there's a vaccine. And then it's like, okay, well, how are you going to, but once there's a vaccine, how do you get 300 million people to take that vaccine? And what about the anti-vaxxers? So are those 50 million people not going to get to go to concerts? Or are we all going to wear cards that say, look, I was vaccinated. Okay, great. You can come in, but you can't. I mean, there's just so many unknowns and so many crazy questions that we have. The future kind of scares me if I think too much about it, because every time you think you've chipped off, all right, we've got this layer solved, you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's this. And
what if the vaccine doesn't work?
Right. All the time, like Garth Brooks, I'm crying every 5 minutes. I just thought of these things. But what if the vaccine doesn't work? Or what if we can't manufacture enough of it? Or what if, there's a civil war? I don't know. There's a million things that could happen right now. And it's just like, I'm just kind of hunkered down and just, I think what disappoints me the most right now is like, as a country, we're not taking care of each other when we need to be taken care of. And it's like, I pay a lot of money in taxes every year. I put on events that raise a lot of tax dollars. And for, I might need to sit on the sidelines for a year. And the fact that I can't even get full unemployment is just like mind blowing to me. And it's incredibly frustrating. It's like, as an American, we should all be just so disheartened and disappointed. It doesn't matter which side of the political scale you're on. Like, we have failed. And it's like, I might be homeless in 8 months. And how do I do it with a mouth to feed as a kid? And how do I do this? And it's like, when you add that on top of the uncertainty of all this, at least it was like, okay, I know that there's enough. The government's going to take care of me. And I know that like, I'm going to be enough to get by as we figure all of these things out. Cool. But when you factor in all of that crushing uncertainty on top of the fact that, the three of us have made a living and done following our dreams, are doing shit that we can't believe we are ever doing. And we don't know if or when we're going to have that chance again. And I'm not a religious person, except when it comes to rock and roll. And it's like, man, I need a concert right now. Like, I need to go sing Badlands at the top of my lungs. I just need it. And to not have that release possibly for a year or more, that hurts my soul as well. So, we're bringing this really down here at the end. But
that's okay. We always bring it down at the end. Well, thanks for joining us, Adam. This has been awesome. It's been really great to see you again.
I miss you, buddy. I miss you. And thank you guys for having me. It's fun to wax poetic about these things. And it's nice I keep saying, one last note is like, my wife and I keep saying, like, we keep feeling like we're alone, and you have to keep reminding yourself, like, you're not alone. Like,
absolutely.
All of us are going through this exact same thing. And like, to talk to you guys, and Brian, I miss you. And Ryan, you're awesome. And it's like, to actually sit down and talk and be like, we're all different parts of the country, and like, we're all feeling the exact same anxieties and the same frustrations. It makes me feel better today, just having this conversation with you guys. And hopefully, we can all do this more often, because like, it helps to just realize you're not alone. So,
for sure. Well, I was going to end on a down note, but you brought it up again. So
Sorry.
There you go.
That's pro.
All right.
That's a pro move.
There you go. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back next week, maybe, Ryan. We'll figure it out with Donnie.
Yeah, it might be just a Brian and Ryan wax poetic next week.
We can do that for sure. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye,
Bye, guys.